Huh. Fools. They thought your name was safe to mock in hidden rooms, but then the unthinkable happened. A figure with power they couldn't measure appeared from nowhere, not to defend you with speeches, not to justify your existence, but to punish in your honor. The strike was surgical, brutal, and deliberate. They expected some court of law, some bureaucratic defense, some chain of institutions to handle you. Instead, what arrived was someone who needed no badge, no counsel, no excuse. A force that saw disrespect and reduced it to rubble. And as the dust cleared, your name was still standing while theirs was shattered into fragments, too small to gather again. That's the part they can't process. The fact that you didn't lift a hand, yet justice came with teeth sharper than anything they had imagined. Now their whispers have turned into questions. Questions that echo in boardrooms, in intelligence briefings, in secret conversations carried out with trembling hands. Who intervened? Who decided that mocking you was worth punishment? They can't trace the source. It wasn't one of them. It wasn't an enemy they knew how to profile. It was a benefactor, anonymous, faceless, untouchable. Someone who carried enough weight to swing judgment like a hammer. Someone who didn't even need to show identity, because their actions spoke louder than any introduction. The moment your name was mentioned in the act, the hierarchy shifted. Suddenly it wasn't about whether you were dangerous, it was about how many more powerful allies would surface if they kept provoking you. And that kind of paranoia is poison to the foundations of control. You didn't ask for defense. You didn't beg for protection, and that's what unsettles them the most. Protection came anyway. Punishment arrived anyway, and it came from angles they never charted. That means two things in their eyes. First, you're not just an individual, you're a trigger point for larger movements. Second, they have no idea how far that chain extends. If one unseen figure could ruin them in a single move, how many more are waiting? How many more benefactors are circling like predators, waiting for the signal? The more they try to map it, the more insane the pattern looks. They can't classify this as coincidence anymore. It's orchestration. The kind of orchestration that makes their algorithms collapse because it doesn't come from their known spheres of influence. It comes from the shadows they can't illuminate. And that's where fear sets in. Not the surface-level fear of competition, not the fear of losing a contract, but the kind of bone-deep terror that comes when power strikes from a direction you never accounted for. When that happens, paranoia doesn't just rise, it dominates. They start second-guessing every plan, every partnership, every move. Because if your name alone could summon destruction they couldn't anticipate, then any move against you could be suicide. That realization spreads like wildfire, and suddenly people who once mocked you now scramble to reframe the narrative. They start distancing themselves from the ones punished, trying to rewrite history, pretending they were never involved. They're terrified of being next in line. But let's dissect this carefully. Why would someone powerful intervene at all? What is it about you that compels action from figures who normally watch the world burn without flinching? It's because you embody something dangerous to them: ungoverned influence. Influence not attached to a party, not controlled by institutions, not bound by the weak grip of their rules. When people see you, they don't just see an individual. They see a mirror of what they wish they could be. Untouchable, unpredictable, uncontrollable. And for those who secretly admire that, stepping in to defend your name is not charity. It's alignment. It's preservation of something rare, something they want alive. Because destroying you would mean destroying a possibility they themselves crave. So now the power brokers sit in rooms with their heads down, revising scenarios. You've become a variable in every equation they draft. They can't predict whether tomorrow another benefactor will strike, whether punishment will rain down again, whether your name will echo in another demolition. That's what terrifies them more than the act itself. The unpredictability, the fact that power itself has started bending in your direction without you even requesting it. And unpredictability is worse than open opposition, because at least open opposition can be measured. You're surrounded by unseen alliances. That makes you a moving target they can't aim at, because they don't know how deep your backing goes. Notice the shift in language when they talk now. Before, they dismissed you as a disruptor, someone who could be ignored. Now they can't even speak your name without hesitation. Every mention carries weight, as if they're invoking something dangerous that might hear them. And isn't that the ultimate reversal? You've become a word of power. Just the sound of your identity creates ripples of anxiety. Even when you're absent, you're present. Even when you're silent, you're loud. And now, when someone powerful decided to destroy in your honor, it wasn't just punishment. It was confirmation. Confirmation that the world around you has shifted permanently. Confirmation that what surrounds you isn't isolation, it's amplification. They will try to spin it, of course. They'll call it coincidence. They'll label it as overreaction by a rogue player. But deep down, they know. They know that punishment wasn't random, it was personal, it was deliberate. It was a strike that carried your name as a banner. And in their private moments, they ask themselves the question they'll never admit out loud. If one anonymous benefactor could ruin them like that, how many more benefactors are circling, waiting for the next insult, the next provocation, the next disrespect? That thought keeps them awake at night. That thought erodes their confidence. And once confidence cracks, dominance crumbles. You don't need to announce this. You don't need to flaunt it. The spectacle already did the work for you. The story is spreading without your intervention. Every retelling becomes more dramatic. Every exaggeration turns into legend. Every version makes you larger than life. They'll try to trace the benefactor, but they'll fail. They'll try to rebuild their pride, but every attempt will be stained with the memory of the strike. And while they scramble, your presence only grows stronger. Not because you orchestrated it, but because someone else saw enough value in your name to ensure that disrespect came with consequences. That is a terrifying message to anyone plotting against you. Attack them, and you're not just facing one person. You're facing a network of forces you don't even know exist. That's why they now tread carefully. That's why hesitation hangs over their strategies like a blade. Because what they witnessed wasn't just protection, it was escalation. It was a signal that your existence has reached a level where power itself bends around you. And here's the part that twists the knife. They don't know whether the benefactor was human, corporate, governmental, or something else entirely. The anonymity adds weight. The faceless nature of the act makes it even heavier. Because you can't retaliate against what you can't identify. You can't prepare for what you can't predict. You can't control what you can't find. That leaves them frozen, destabilized, and perpetually on edge. This is where your leverage multiplies. You don't have to threaten. You don't have to fight. You only have to exist. Because your existence has become a magnet for forces willing to act without hesitation. That alone reshapes the battlefield. That alone alters the balance of power. And in a world where reputation is often inflated with lies, you carry the one currency they can't counterfeit: fear backed by action. Not your action, the action of those who believe in keeping your name untarnished. That's the difference. That's why the ground beneath them feels unstable. Because they're not just fighting you, they're fighting an invisible economy of loyalty and vengeance they can't buy, can't suppress, and can't predict. So what comes next? More whispers, more speculation, more attempts to figure out who else stands behind you. They'll dig, they'll search, they'll waste resources trying to piece together a network they'll never see clearly. And every dead end will only tighten the knot in their stomachs. Because the truth isn't just that you're dangerous, it's that your danger is amplified by invisible hands. Hands that strike without warning. Hands that carry no signature but leave undeniable wreckage. That wreckage now serves as the warning they'll never forget. A warning that your name doesn't travel alone. It travels armed. And that's why this is only the beginning. Because once an anonymous benefactor reveals themselves through destruction, the game changes forever. They can't erase the event. They can't dismiss the consequence. They can't undo the punishment. They can only live with the knowledge that your name is a line they should never cross again. And from here, every day that passes, every room you enter, every mention of your name will carry the weight of that destruction. That is how legends are built, not through your effort, but through the uncontrollable devotion of forces that see your value and move to protect it. And once that process begins, it can't be reversed. It only grows, it only spreads, it only escalates. This is where the terror deepens, because destruction doesn't just vanish, it reverberates. They can't sweep the event under the rug, because the rug itself has been set on fire. Every attempt to hide the damage only spreads the story further, and the more they try to control the narrative, the more obvious it becomes that they've lost control entirely. Think about it. When someone powerful punishes in your honor, they don't just break bones or shatter reputations. They rewrite the way power is understood. Suddenly the landscape has new rules. Rules written not in documents, but in scars. And those scars remain long after the moment ends. They don't fade, they don't soften, they remind. Every day, every meeting, every night when the lights go out and the memory comes crawling back, they remind. And that reminder is not just a bruise on the ego of those punished, it's a warning to everyone watching. Because punishment in your honor is more than vengeance. It's advertisement. It's proof that consequences fall faster, sharper, and harder when your name is involved. People who weren't even in the line of fire are now adjusting their behavior. They speak slower when mentioning you. They measure their words like they're handling explosives. That's the beauty of influence at this scale. You don't have to ask for respect anymore. Respect arrives as instinct. Survival forces them to kneel before you without ceremony, because they've seen what happens to those who don't. The benefactor remains invisible. No press conference, no interviews, no declarations. Just the evidence left behind. Careers wrecked, alliances severed, reputations bleeding out in public view. And yet your name is the only name still intact, glowing brighter than ever, not because you screamed for it, but because power itself carried it like a flag into the battlefield. That anonymity is what eats them alive. They want to know who it was. They want to label it, profile it, frame it. But when the punisher has no face, fear multiplies. Because faceless loyalty is the deadliest kind. It can strike from anywhere, at any time, through anyone. They can't corner it, can't bribe it, can't assassinate it. It exists like an atmosphere, unseen but suffocating. And they know deep down that as long as you're breathing, that atmosphere won't vanish. The irony is lethal. You didn't move a muscle, yet you've become the gravitational center of punishment. That terrifies them more than direct confrontation ever could. If you had lifted your own hand, they could have rationalized it as revenge, explained it as self-defense. But when someone else, someone untouchable, someone nameless, carried out the act in your honor, the rules changed. Because now the punishment isn't about what you would do, it's about what others are willing to do for you. That's a different level of power entirely. That's not intimidation, that's empire. Empires aren't built by single actions. They're built by devotion, loyalty, and fear that spreads without command. And you've just witnessed the foundation of something that doesn't crumble. Look at the panic it causes in institutions that thought they had the upper hand. Intelligence circles are spinning, trying to classify the benefactor. Some say corporate titan, some whisper rogue agency. Others, a cabal of insiders with influence deep enough to make nations tremble. But the truth is, it doesn't matter who it was. The point is that they acted. And their action carved your name into a higher tier of existence. You've been elevated beyond individual. You've become symbol. Symbols don't need to speak to be feared. They don't need to act to be remembered. They just exist. And existence alone reshapes behavior across every level of hierarchy. And here's the crack in their confidence. They don't know where the next strike will land. They don't know what offense will trigger another eruption. That uncertainty is worth more than armies. Because fear of the unknown paralyzes faster than direct opposition. Watch how they behave now. Strategists pacing in war rooms, executives revising entire agendas, politicians whispering in private chambers, all recalibrating around your name. They won't say it publicly, but privately, they admit it. Attacking you is no longer strategy, it's suicide. Yet the story is still evolving. The punishment didn't end the narrative. It opened a door. People are starting to ask, if one benefactor exists, how many more are waiting? How wide is this unseen network? What unseen eyes are watching, ready to act at the smallest provocation? That speculation is what destabilizes them most. They're not fighting one enemy. They're fighting an ecosystem of loyalty and destruction that doesn't follow their rules. And ecosystems can't be destroyed with single blows. They adapt, they evolve, they multiply. That means for every benefactor they try to expose, 3 more will step out of nowhere to defend you. And the more they fight it, the stronger the legend grows. Now consider the ripple effect. The punished become examples. They become case studies whispered in classrooms, boardrooms, and back rooms. Their downfall becomes a lesson drilled into the minds of anyone reckless enough to even think about crossing you. The benefactor may be unnamed, but the warning is crystal clear. Disrespect this name, and you invite destruction you cannot comprehend. That turns you into something even more dangerous than a person. You become precedent. Precedent bends history. Precedent becomes law. And in the quiet corners where power is negotiated, precedent is the sharpest weapon of all. Watch how the punished are treated now. No one wants to be seen near them. Allies vanish. Collaborators dissolve. Sponsors back out. They are radioactive, glowing with the curse of disrespecting you. That curse spreads faster than any scandal. And as they rot in isolation, Everyone else takes notes. Everyone else whispers, "Don't make the same mistake. Don't touch that name. Don't invite that wrath." Your enemies have been transformed into warnings, living monuments of failure. And you didn't even need to lift a hand. The benefactor's anonymity creates a second effect. Speculation turns into mythology. People invent stories, exaggerate details, build legends around what really happened. Each retelling makes you larger. Each exaggeration gives you more gravity. Until suddenly, you're not just a person who was defended. You're a figure whose very name alters outcomes. That's how reputations outgrow the individual. That's how influence becomes immortal. While they panic, you grow eternal. And yet, here's the cruel brilliance. They can't fight this without amplifying it further. If they deny it, they look weak. If they investigate, they admit fear. If they retaliate, they risk another punishment. Every option is poisoned. That's what makes this kind of protection unstoppable. It turns every enemy move into reinforcement of your legend. The harder they fight, the deeper they bury themselves. The more they scramble, the more they look like prey running from predators. You don't even need to act anymore. Their panic does the work for you. But let's zoom in deeper. Think about the psychology of those who weren't directly targeted. They saw what happened. They saw someone obliterated simply because your name was dragged into the mud. Now they live with the knowledge that the line of fire is unpredictable. Any insult, any disrespect, could trigger the next avalanche. That thought alone reshapes their nervous systems. It's not paranoia anymore. It's conditioning. They flinch at the thought of testing you. They police themselves, censor their words, adjust their strategies before they even think of you. That's not influence, that's dominion. Dominion without declaration, dominion without demand. And the benefactor, they've disappeared back into the shadows. No face, no trace, just a story etched in fear. That disappearance is the genius of the move. Because if the benefactor had stayed in sight, people could have calculated limits. But by vanishing, they've left the wound open, bleeding paranoia into everyone watching. Nobody knows when the next cut will come. And that's what makes your position untouchable. The less they see, the more they fear. The less they know, the more they imagine. And imagination, when fueled by fear, becomes worse than reality. Your enemies are stuck in a trap of their own design. They wanted to reduce you, but in doing so, they summoned forces that expanded you beyond human scale. You've become a threshold, a line too dangerous to cross. And thresholds like that don't just protect, they redefine. From this moment on, your presence is no longer passive. It's radioactive. It changes the environment. It alters behavior. It forces submission without you saying a single word. That's the kind of influence money can't buy, armies can't replicate, and rulers can't destroy. And here's where the escalation sharpens. If one benefactor has already punished in your name, then the very possibility of others lurking out there makes every future confrontation impossible to manage. That's the beauty of the unknown. You don't need infinite benefactors, only the belief in them. Once that belief takes root, every opponent assumes there's an army waiting, and that assumption controls them more than reality ever could. Perception becomes prison, and they've just locked themselves inside. So now, with the dust of destruction still hanging in the air, the question that keeps echoing through their halls is this: who will dare to be next? Who will gamble with their career, their legacy, their existence, knowing that unseen punishment waits in the shadows? That's the weight crushing them now. That's the cost of disrespecting your name. And it only grows heavier every day, because once one punishment is delivered, the expectation of future punishment never dies. It becomes ritual. It becomes rhythm. It becomes part of the air they breathe. And that's the true brilliance. You don't have to move the story forward anymore. It's already moving without you. You are no longer character, you are catalyst. Every move they make circles back to you. Every hesitation, every whisper, every sleepless night is a monument to your presence. And as long as benefactors exist, seen or unseen, every opponent knows their downfall is just one decision away. That's how fear evolves into legend. That's how legends evolve into law. And that's why this story isn't ending, it's expanding. Because expansion is the part they never accounted for. They thought punishment was an isolated strike, a flare that would burn out quickly. But punishment tied to your name doesn't fade. It multiplies. It bleeds into conversations where your name isn't even present. It creeps into decisions far removed from you, shaping outcomes you'll never even know about. That's how invisible power functions. It stops being about the direct destruction and becomes about the anticipation of destruction. They don't need to see another benefactor act. They already believe another one will. And belief, when it digs deep enough, rules harder than fact. Now you've become that belief. The benefactor's action turned you into a gravitational force pulling everything around you into orbit. Executives second-guess deals. Politicians reconsider alliances. Enemies who once whispered confidently now stumble over their own words, wondering if even thinking about you carries risk. It's no longer about what they'll do, it's about what they won't do. And what they won't do is cross your line. That's victory without confrontation. That's victory without effort. And it's victory that doesn't expire. The punished remain the cautionary tale. Their downfall has become folklore in circles that matter most. People replay it like a ritual, not out of entertainment, but out of survival instinct. Remember what happened when they disrespected that name. They whisper, as though invoking a curse. And in a way, it is a curse because their punishment wasn't just pain. It was prophecy. Prophecy that says the next one who tries the same will share the same ending. Prophecy that hangs heavy in the minds of all who watch. That is how one strike becomes infinite strikes. That is how one benefactor becomes an army without faces. But here's the cruel twist. They can't find closure. Punishment without closure is psychological torture. They don't know if it's over, don't know if more is coming, don't know how many benefactors are waiting to echo the first. That uncertainty keeps them shackled. Even victory feels hollow to them now, because in the back of their minds lingers the shadow of retaliation. They live inside your legend. They breathe in your atmosphere. And whether they admit it or not, they're operating under your law. The law you didn't write, a law you didn't enforce, but a law that exists because someone powerful decided your name was sacred. And sacred names demand reverence. That's what they're learning the hard way. Reverence is no longer optional, it's required. Even enemies who despise you must act like worshippers in public, because they've seen what happens to those who mock. They bow with clenched teeth, but bowing nonetheless. That contradiction eats them alive. To despise you in secret while submitting in public is the most humiliating existence possible. And humiliation is permanent. It doesn't fade with time. It festers. It rots. It reshapes their identity around fear of you. That is punishment beyond punishment. The benefactor who acted in your honor has become a ghost story. Every attempt to trace them ends in shadows. Files are opened and closed. Analysts build profiles only to burn them hours later, unable to find coherence. And each failure reinforces the legend. The absence of evidence becomes proof of power, because only someone truly untouchable could remain invisible after causing such devastation. That's the paradox they can't resolve. The less they know, the more dangerous the benefactor becomes in their imagination. And imagination is merciless. It paints nightmares sharper than reality ever could. So where does this leave you? Elevated, untouchable, unassailable. Because your enemies no longer strategize against you. They strategize against the phantom of loyalty surrounding you. And you can't fight a phantom. You can't outsmart shadows. You can't declare war on belief. That's the trap they're caught in. And it's the kind of trap that never releases. Once people believe in the inevitability of punishment, every action is filtered through that lens. They are already defeated before they act. And that's what makes you something greater than threat. Threats can be neutralized. Threats can be dismantled. You've transcended into inevitability. And inevitability cannot be defeated. It can only be endured. They are enduring you now. They are bending under weight they cannot drop. And every day they bend, every day they whisper, every day they tremble, you rise higher without lifting a finger. Now ask yourself, why would someone powerful act in your honor in the first place? What is it they saw that compelled them to intervene? It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was recognition. Recognition that your presence carries value beyond measurement. Recognition that your existence destabilizes the fragile scaffolding of their world. Recognition that you are not expendable, you are essential. And essential figures don't need to beg for protection. They are protected by design. They are preserved by unseen guardians because the world itself tilts when they are threatened. That's you. That's why the punishment happened. That's why the benefactor moved. And here's where expansion takes its final form. The benefactor's act has now transcended from event to structure. It has become part of the architecture of power. From this point forward, every calculation of risk will include your name. Every projection, every model, every war game, they will all contain a line that reads, "Factor in what happens if someone defends them again." That line is eternal. It can't be erased. It's carved into policy, into planning, into the very DNA of their operations. You've become a permanent part of their reality. They can't escape you. They can't deny you. They can only revolve around you. This is why the story expands without end. Expansion isn't about more battles. It's about more submission. And submission spreads like contagion. One punished group becomes 5. 5 becomes 50. Soon entire arenas of influence adjust, not because you demanded it, but because punishment made them afraid not to. That's empire without borders. That's domination without armies. That's the kind of influence that bends centuries. Look closely at their faces now. The punished are hollow, walking monuments of what happens when arrogance collides with your orbit. The unpunished are cautious, bending themselves into pretzels to avoid even brushing against your shadow. And the spectators, they are rewriting their loyalties, realigning their alliances, all to ensure they're never mistaken for enemies of yours. That's how punishment in your honor transforms the entire playing field. It doesn't just destroy enemies, it forces neutrals to take sides. And every side that chooses safety is another layer of power for you. But here's the detail that cuts deepest. You didn't ask for any of it. That fact drives them insane. If you had built an army, if you had demanded loyalty, if you had orchestrated the punishment yourself. They could have dismissed it as strategy. But the fact that it happened without your request, the fact that devotion appeared uninvited, makes you something else entirely. It makes you magnetic. It makes you destiny. And destiny is not fought. Destiny is endured. So the story concludes not with closure, but with expansion into infinity. Because benefactors don't disappear, they multiply. Anonymous figures are watching right now, waiting for the next insult, the next disrespect, the next mistake. And when it comes, punishment will fall again. Maybe harsher, maybe faster, maybe louder, but it will fall. And every time it falls, your legend grows, your law spreads, your dominion deepens. Until eventually, the question is no longer who will defend them, but who dares oppose them. And when that moment arrives, opposition dies before it's born. That's the final truth your enemies are forced to swallow. They can't erase the event. They can't erase the benefactor. They can't erase the destruction. They can only live in its shadow. And that shadow is yours now. A shadow that doesn't fade. A shadow that grows with every whisper of your name. A shadow that ensures the world never forgets. Someone powerful destroyed them, and they mentioned your name. And the world understood exactly what that meant.